I've been a physician for over 40 years. Through the decades, I've not only cared for my patients, but also quietly watched myself grow older. Aging has a way of creeping in, not always with pain or clear symptoms, but with small shifts that are easy to overlook. One of those shifts is waking up at 3 a.m., night after night, without knowing exactly why. Many older adults come to see me not because of a sharp pain or a specific illness, but because, as they put it, I just don't sleep like I used to. They say this with a mix of concern and frustration. "Doctor, am I developing insomnia? Is something wrong with my brain?" Some even whisper the question they're most afraid to ask: is this a sign that something serious is coming? And then they tell me, almost always the same story, that they wake up at 3 a.m., sometimes 3:10, sometimes 2:45. At first it happens now and then. Later, it becomes a pattern. I've heard that story countless times, but more importantly, I understand it. Not just through studies or charts, but through my own body. You see, aging is not an illness, it's a transition. And these early morning wake-ups, these quiet moments in the dark, aren't necessarily a problem to be fixed. They're signals. Signals from a body and a mind that are still working, still adjusting, still very much alive. So today I want to talk to you about those 3 a.m. awakenings. Not as a doctor preaching from a podium, but as someone who's walked a few steps ahead of you. I want to help you understand why they happen and how you might begin to see them not as interruptions, but as part of a new rhythm. One that asks for gentler care, deeper listening, and a little more compassion for yourself. I remember one night a few years ago, I woke up at exactly 3:20 a.m. There was no noise, no bad dream, no sharp pain, just a quiet, steady wakefulness. I got out of bed, poured myself a glass of water, and stood by the kitchen window for a while. The street lamp cast a soft light through the trees. Everything was still, and in that stillness I realized my body was trying to tell me something in its own quiet way. It wasn't a symptom to fix. It was a rhythm that had changed. When we're young, sleep often comes in long, uninterrupted stretches, as if the body needs to shut out the world entirely. But as we grow older, something shifts. The world inside us begins to speak, softly but clearly. And often during those quiet hours, the day never touches. A decrease in melatonin? That's to be expected. Light, fragmented sleep? Not unusual. These aren't signs of something wrong, they're signs of something real. Signs that the body needs different things now. Not better or worse, just different. I often tell my patients, sleep at 70 won't be the same as sleep at 30, and it's not supposed to be. Just as we don't expect our hearts to beat with the urgency of youth, we shouldn't expect our sleep to remain unchanged. Some people need to adjust the light in their bedroom. Others need a warmer blanket or a softer mattress to ease the tension in an aging back. And some, like me, simply need 5 minutes before bed to write down a few thoughts, to let the mind unwind gently before sleep comes. And then there are nights when we wake not because the body is uncomfortable, but because the heart is stirring. I've woken up thinking of a former patient I worried over. I found myself missing my mother, who passed many years ago, and realizing how long it's been since I've truly spoken to her in my thoughts. Other nights, there's no particular reason at all, just the quiet sense that I am alive and present in this moment, in a way that only the early hours can reveal. You see, the body doesn't betray us. It evolves, slowly, subtly, like time itself. The trouble is, we were taught early on that waking up in the middle of the night means something's wrong, that it's a sign of decline or imbalance. But in truth, it might simply be the body's way of saying, I'm still here, pay attention. We no longer live by alarm clocks or busy calendars like we once did, and so the body has more space to respond not only to biological cues, but also to emotions, to memory, to the unfinished conversations we carry with us. Waking at 3 a.m. isn't a flaw. It's part of a slower, deeper rhythm, one that asks us to listen, not silence it. And if we learn to respond with curiosity instead of frustration, we might discover something meaningful there. I don't say this as theory, I say it from experience. And I believe that if you begin to see these wakeful moments as part of who you are, not as an intruder, you may find a different kind of peace. Not the peace of perfect sleep, but the peace that comes from knowing you are still here, still sensing, still living fully. Even at 3 a.m., but you know your body isn't betraying you. It's speaking to you. Waking up at 3 a.m. might be your body's way of saying, something needs your attention, not in alarm, not in panic, just in presence. Sometimes it's as simple as needing a bit more movement in the afternoon. I've learned this myself. On days when I sit too long reading, writing, or doing paperwork, I tend to sleep lighter. But on days when I take a walk after dinner, even just a slow one around the block, my sleep has more depth. It's like my body sighs with relief. Ah, thank you, that's what I needed. Other times it's the light. We don't think much of it, but our eyes, even in older age, are still sensitive to brightness. The blue light from a phone screen or the harsh glare of a ceiling light in the late evening can tell the brain, stay alert. That's not what we want before bed. I began using softer lamps, reading real books instead of screens, and it changed the way my evenings felt. More gentle, more restful, more like winding down rather than gearing up. And then there are those small adjustments, the kind we often overlook. A new pillow that supports your neck just a bit better. Moving your medication to an earlier hour because it's keeping you up without you realizing it. Drinking less fluid after dinner. Or adding a warm herbal tea instead of a second cup of coffee at 4 p.m. They sound minor, don't they? But as I often tell my patients and remind myself, aging makes us more responsive to the small things. Our systems aren't sluggish, they're more sensitive. That's not a weakness. That's precision. And then there's the emotional part, the one we rarely speak of. Sometimes, waking up in the dark is a signal that something inside us hasn't been expressed. A thought we haven't written down, a worry we haven't voiced, a memory that wants to visit, not to haunt us, but to be acknowledged. I've kept a journal by my bedside for years now, not because I write something every night, but because when I do wake up with a full mind, I can give those thoughts somewhere to go, a place outside of me. And more often than not, once I've written something down, just a few honest lines, I can close the notebook, lie back, and let my mind rest. Our bodies remember what we try to forget. They remember the rhythm we used to live by, the relationships that shaped us, the unfinished moments. And sometimes, when the world is quiet and the distractions are gone, the body gently taps us on the shoulder and says, "You've been carrying this, maybe it's time to let it breathe." So no, your 3 a.m. wake-ups aren't proof that something is broken. They're invitations, gentle ones. Not to do more, but to listen more carefully to your habits, your environment, your needs, and even your emotions. That's how the body communicates with us in this stage of life. Not with sirens, but with whispers. And if we learn to hear those whispers, we may find ourselves living with more ease, more self-compassion, and ironically sleeping better too. Instead of fighting what is natural, I've learned to lean into it, to listen rather than resist. A 3 a.m. wake-up is not the failure of sleep. It can be an unexpected moment of connection, a chance to breathe slower, to notice what's happening inside, to revisit an old memory that still means something, or simply to be reminded that this body, with all its changes and vulnerabilities, still deserves kindness and patience. You're not losing sleep. You're entering a new kind of rest, one that blends wakefulness and stillness in a rhythm that belongs to this stage of life. And when you begin to accept that, truly accept it, not just as theory but as your own lived reality, you'll notice something shifts. That 3 a.m. moment no longer feels like an intruder. It becomes something gentler, almost familiar, like an old companion quietly showing up to check in, to remind you, you're still here, you're still listening, and you still have the power to shape how you live each day. I often think about how different my relationship with sleep is now than it was in my 40s. Back then, I measured rest by how many hours I got. I wanted full nights, uninterrupted, predictable, But these days I measure rest by how I feel in the morning. Did I treat myself gently? Did I listen to what my body was asking for, even if it didn't fit the old rules? Some nights I wake up and stay up for an hour. Other nights I fall right back asleep after sipping water and adjusting my pillow. And some nights I just lie there with my eyes closed, not sleeping, but not needing to be anywhere else either. There is peace in that. Not perfection, but peace. And that's more than enough. I had a patient once, a retired teacher, 82 years old, who told me something I've never forgotten. She said, "I used to hate waking up at 3 a.m. I thought it meant I was falling apart, but now I just let it happen. I don't fight it anymore. I make a cup of tea, I read a few pages of poetry, and then I sleep when my body lets me. I've stopped trying to control everything. And honestly, I feel better." That's the wisdom age gives us if we let it. To let go of the fight, to see beauty in the pauses, to allow stillness to be enough. So if you find yourself awake tonight, don't panic. Don't judge yourself. Just notice. Be present. Maybe this is a moment to check in with your heart, your breath, your body. Maybe it's nothing more than a quiet chapter in the book of your night. Whatever it is, it doesn't mean something's wrong. It just means you're still alive, still responsive, still growing in your own quiet way. And there is something deeply reassuring in that. There's something I've come to appreciate about these quiet hours. Something I never would have expected when I was younger, always rushing through my days, always expecting sleep to be as simple as flipping a switch. Back then, I would have called these moments inconveniences. Now, I see them as pauses. Gentle ones. You see, at this stage of life, we begin to live more inwardly. The world outside slows down, yes, but inside there's still so much movement, so much memory, so much reflection. When I wake up at 3 a.m. now, I no longer ask, "What's wrong with me?" Instead, I sometimes ask, "What's stirring?" And more often than not, I'll find the answer isn't medical, it's human. A thought I didn't finish, a feeling I didn't notice during the day, a question I've carried quietly for years. And there's room for those things now. During the busyness of our younger years, raising children, building careers, making ends meet, we don't have time to sit with those subtler parts of ourselves. But in these later years, when life allows for more quiet, those parts finally speak. And they tend to do it when everything else is still, like at 3 a.m. That's why I've stopped trying to fix these moments. I've even grown to welcome them. I keep a soft lamp on my nightstand, a worn paperback, a blanket I can wrap around my shoulders if I decide to sit by the window for a few minutes. These aren't solutions, they're comforts. And comfort at this stage is sometimes more healing than control. I had another patient, Roger in his late 70s, who once told me that his 3 a.m. awakenings became his time to check in with himself. He didn't always write or read. Sometimes he just sat in the quiet and looked back on his life. Not with regret, but with curiosity. "It's like the night gives me permission to feel things I didn't feel before," he said, "that stayed with me." Because he was right. There's a certain kind of honesty that only lives in the dark. Not the darkness of fear, but of stillness. And when we stop fearing that space, we often discover that it holds something valuable. A kind of truth we can't always hear in daylight. Is you don't have to do anything grand with those wakeful moments. You don't have to turn them into a project or a ritual, but you can meet them with presence, with less resistance, with a soft willingness to ask, "What is this moment asking of me?" Sometimes the answer is simple, a glass of water, a shift in position, a calming breath. Other times it's deeper, a memory, a longing, or just the quiet reminder that you are still here, alive, feeling, growing, even now. And if that's all you take from it, that's more than enough. We spend much of our lives chasing structure and certainty, but in these later years, I've learned that peace often comes in unexpected places, in moments we once saw as interruptions. Waking at 3 a.m. might never feel convenient, but it can feel meaningful. It can be a chance to meet yourself where you are without needing to be anywhere else. And maybe, just maybe, that's a kind of rest in itself. Not the kind that comes from 8 uninterrupted hours, but the kind that comes from finally being on your own side. As we come to the end of this conversation, because that's truly what this has been, a quiet conversation between you and me, I want to leave you with something more than advice. I want to leave you with reassurance, and maybe even a little companionship. You're not alone in this, not in waking up at 3 a.m., not in feeling confused about what your body is doing, not in wondering whether this means something is wrong. I've seen too many people, kind, thoughtful, resilient people, blame themselves for what is simply a natural part of getting older. I've done it too. We all have at some point. But over the years, I've learned that aging is not about losing control. It's about building a new kind of relationship with your body, with time, with sleep, and even with silence. That relationship is softer, slower, but no less powerful. If you take one thing from this video, let it be this. Your body is not the enemy. It's not broken, it's not failing, it's adapting. It's still listening to you, still responding to the world, still carrying you through every day and every night, even in ways that feel unfamiliar. Waking at 3 a.m. may never be your favorite part of the day, but it doesn't have to be your enemy either. It can be neutral, or even, at times, meaningful. You might never fall back asleep as quickly as you once did, but you might find other ways to rest, to feel settled, to feel human. And if you do find yourself awake tomorrow morning or the next, I hope you'll remember this moment here. I hope you'll hear my voice reminding you, this is not a problem you have to fix. This is simply something to meet with kindness, with patience, with understanding. Keep a book by your bed, a notebook, a warm blanket, a memory. Keep whatever brings you comfort close at hand, and if nothing else, keep yourself company. That's what we're all learning to do in our own ways as we age. Thank you for spending this time with me. I know how personal sleep can be, how private, how frustrating, how emotional. And I'm grateful you allowed me to speak into that space with you. Wherever you are, whatever your night brings, I hope you'll carry a bit more compassion with you. For your body, for your rest, for the rhythm you're in now. And when morning comes, I hope you greet it not with exhaustion, but with understanding. You're still here, still growing, and still learning how to care for yourself, gently, wisely, and fully. Good night, my friend. Sleep well, in whatever way your body allows.